In Perek Beis Halacha Aleph, the Rambam describes three levels of tshuva. He begins by depicting tshuva gemura, zeh sheba liyado davar she'aver bo ve'efshar biyado lasos u'pirish v'lo osa mipnei tshuva. Then the second level is im lo shav el b'meizik nuso u'be'esh she'yefshar lasos masha ya'osa. And then the third level is afilu ava kol yoma v'osa tshuva b'yom misaso v'meis b'tshuvaso kol avanosav nimchalim. So we understand the three levels. But what's very curious here is that when the Rambam initially, when he's illustrating and depicting tshuva, so he speaks of that a person violated a particular Isser Torah. He committed a particular chet. Shabala yodo davor sha'avavo. And then he continues with that scenario in level number 2. Im lo shav el b'meizik nuso. But all of a sudden, when he depicts level number 3, so the Rambam is no longer talking about a single chet, but when he depicts level number 3, it's afilu ava kol yoma va'oso tshuva yom misaso kol avonosav nimchalim. Now, all of a sudden, the Rambam is talking about a whole multitude of chatoim. Maybe to tell us that chesed that HaKadosh Baruch Hu accepts the tshuva even then was not just for one chet, but even for a person who has lots of chatoim. But that doesn't seem to exhaust what the Rambam has in mind. So, as follows, the Mishnah in Sanhedrin says that if when a person was chayiv skila, so when they would take him out to administer the Mises Bezdin, so when they were approaching the base of skila, so they would say to him, Omim lo hisvade, that they would tell him to be misvade. So even though the Mishnah there is speaking in context of someone who's chayiv Mises Bezdin, but the Bryson in Masechah Shabbos says that Misha Chala v'natalamos is the exact same lashon of Omim lo hisvade. So what it says there is not limited to someone who's chayiv Mises Bezdin, but it means someone who indications are might be Rachmana litzlan approaching death, because the Brisa says in Shabbos Misha Chala v'natalamos is also Omim lo hisvade. So the Mishnah in Sanhedrin continues and says that if Einu Yodea lehisvados, if the person doesn't know how to be misvada, so we coach him. So Omim lo, we say to him, Emor, say the following: Tehei misasi kapara al kol avonosai. That lashon. Tehei misasi kapara al kol avonosai. Now the Brisa in Masach at the end of Yuma in the Teshuvah Sugis has a machlokes Tanoim whether or not vidui has to include Pirat HaChet. So if Yehuda ben Bav is of the opinion that it does, that tzarich lifrod es HaChet, because when Moshe Rabbeinu was being misvada on behalf of Klal Yisrael, after the Chet HaEgel, he says, Ono chato am hazeh chato gedola, vayasu lahem Elohei zahav. And that's how the Rambam paskins in the beginning of Hilchos Teshuvah, that when the Rambam says, Ketzed mizvada ona Hashem chatasi avisi pashadi lefanecha ve'osisi kach v'kach, and he specifies the chet. So the question is, when we're coaching this person who doesn't know how to be mizvada, so why don't we encourage him to try to recall whatever specific chatoim he can think of? Okay, at that time, he's not necessarily going to be so composed, and maybe he's not going to be able to, to exhaustively search the memory bank, but at least encourage him to be mefaret what he can. Okay, so he can say that an undertone, ashrei nesoy peshek soy chato, he doesn't need to be mefarsem it, but why aren't we encouraging him to be mefaret the chet? So l'chara, what emerges from there is that tshuva b'yom misa, and this is reflected in the vidui, is different than tshuva in the middle of a person's life. Again, middle of a person's life doesn't mean that he's 35 or 40. It means that there's still some time, maybe only a day, but there's still some time in front of him. And it differs in the following sense. The tshuva in midlife has to be atomized and itemized. That the person has to be misyaches to individual chatoim. The tshuva relates, again, there may be sort of global and encompassing yesodos, but the tshuva also has to happen on the atomic level. It has to be vasisi kach v'kach. It has to relate to individual chatoim. Masha and Cain, the tshuva b'yom misa. So a person is being misvada about his life. Let's say you have a teenager, and he's very wild in high school. So one scenario is that the principal calls him in after 10th grade and tells him, look, we're ready to expel you. We're willing to let you stay on probation. But here, you need to sign this contract. So clearly that contract is not only going to say he has to abide by all rules, but it's going to specify all the things all the infractions he's been guilty of, and that he won't do this, he won't do this, he won't do this. But what happens, scenario number two, if the conversation is not happening in the middle of high school, but let's say he got away with it, and now it's the day after graduation, and he comes to the principal and he wants to apologize. He's not going to start going through a whole laundry list. He's going to say, look, I recognize that my high school career was a disaster, and I'm sorry. I realize that it was a total abysmal failure, and I'm sorry. And on the contrary, in this context, to itemize would almost minimize what he's saying. So the tshuva, and therefore this is reflected in the vidui as well, the tshuva b'yom misa is not, again, doesn't happen on the atomic level. It happens in terms of its misyaches to a person's life. Oh, so that's the pshat here in Perek Beis Halacha Aleph. When the Rambam is depicting the first two, so he's talking about, again, tshuva gemura, and then the second stage, but the person still has life in front of him. So then tshuva is on the atomic level as well. So the Rambam speaks about the illustration. It's enough to have one illustration. When it comes to the third level of b'yom misa, so at this point there's no more atomic tshuva. It's not the tshuva doesn't target one by one. It doesn't also have to target one by one each chatoim. So there the Rambam speaks of kol avonos of nimchalim.
I presume something similar also applies for like Yom Kippur because it said it's closer out Hashem. Yeah. Also, for example, if someone, because very often, like the bad matter is man is for most